Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome back to the Dish with Dina podcast. I am so happy to have you join us again. Today, my guest is Diana Franco. Diana and I dish about friendships and careers that have spanned the decades and how to build the perfect lasagna. Diana has worked in publishing for the past 15 years as a publicist. She's a lifelong New Yorker who loves hiking and finding new discoveries throughout her city every day. So sit back, enjoy the conversation, and let's dish. Welcome, Diana Franco, to the Dish with Dina podcast. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Doing all right. We are recording this on a Friday. Not that time is relevant during a pandemic, but I'm happy that it's the end of the week. So let us start with my usual questions, as some people might have already become accustomed to hearing. This is kind of the theme of the podcast show, as learning about our food behaviors, our early childhood memories, food relationships, and how that leads us into the current us. But before we do that, let's take a trip down memory lane and share with everybody how we met. Do we remember that story?
I remember it incredibly vividly. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is like a dream come true for me because you are just one of the most amazing people in my life. And I'm so happy that you're doing this. And I think it's really cool. And I want to meet all your friends that you've had on because they're so much fun. So this is a really cool thing because so one of the things about you that's always been really interesting for me is that you have all these different friends and relationships and coworkers and like all these different spaces. And now I get to meet them all, which is really cool. But anyway, getting back to how we met, I remember it like it was yesterday because, I work in publishing and I had just really started my career and I met a good friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Libby Powell. Give her a shout out. She's the best.
Shout out, Libby.
Shout out, Libby. We love you. Libby and I worked together at an internship that I had, my first internship in the publishing space on the publisher side. And she became such a special friend to me. And one night we were going to go out to dinner or something. And she was like, oh, my friend Dina is coming. And I was like, sure, whatever. And you had a particularly interesting week at work. And you sort of dominated the conversation in the best possible way to tell us the crazy story that had happened to you. And I won't get into it, but
I know
it was amazing. And I left that dinner and I had the biggest like girl crush on you. And I just said to Libby, I was like, make that girl my friend. I want to see her forever. And so we did. We like became friends, and we, it's not surprising we met over a meal, let's be honest. But then I remember we did get together again, and I think maybe I was just with Libby once, and we had said, because she has another friend of ours, Katie Walton, which is her maiden name, but she's always Katie Walton to me. But she and Libby were friends, and I think Libby and I were out to dinner once. We were like, we should get Katie and Dina all together because they're friends, right? And we didn't realize that you guys had never met each other. So when we planned a dinner for the four of us to get together and talk about life and everything, Libby and I realized then that you guys didn't know each other, but it was a testament to you and also our friend Katie that like we knew you were so easygoing that we already assumed you were friends. And I'm mentioning it because we have to talk about the thing that you and I have, a special part of our friendship is at that dinner, you talked about how you had seen a speaker who had talked about, really getting together in your life with people and how we always say like, oh yeah, like, let's do lunch, let's do drinks, let's do brunch, like, and it never happens because adulthood is hard and, it just never happens. And you are such a planner, and I know that you're Franklin Covey all the way. And I was so moved by that because I'm a really disorganized person. And I was like, oh yeah, like if you actually plan it. And you were like, well, what I do in my life is I have like boards in my life, boards of directors in my life. And so I have this board over here and this board over here. And like, I schedule monthly or weekly meetings with these people, whether it's like a drink or a phone call or whatever. And that's how I stay on track with all of my professional and personal relationships. And this was just so moving for all of us. We thought that was such a great idea. And so we instated monthly board meeting, and
We
you
did.
guys are still my board. And I don't know how long it's been. It's been like 12, 13 years. I don't even know.
It's 16.
No.
It's like 16-ish. I think it's 15 or I was in publishing only from 2004 to 2008. And so it couldn't have been much longer than when I first started, because some of the juicy stuff happened in that first couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was 2004, 2005. And also because who you're talking about was Pamela Mitchell, who was the seminar
on Instagram.
We all do. She's the original, she's the OG. And she was the one that was giving the seminar on career reinvention at the time, like develop. So I had just gone into publishing from having come from, retail and other things that I was doing. And she, which we can go into, she talked a little bit about what you were just saying, developing that board of directors, those people who are going to be around you to support you and guide you and help you with your goals, but aren't like, your best friend and your sister, because these are very, I guess, people who have a little bit more investment in your life and will be like, you're awesome with everything. You want people who could kind of tell you the truth. And so, so that was, I think, my dear, I think we're going on 15 years here. I hate to say it.
That's great. That's amazing.
And I wanted to say too, that what we're talking about back then is currently what I believe is like the mastermind groups. Am I right? Like that's what we call masterminds now. Back then we didn't have that name. We just said the board of directors, and we called ourselves the board meetings and stuff. And you were the original group of people that I met with kind of more consistently in that year. And I've been doing those every single year since then.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you know what, it honestly, because I'm younger than all of you. And for me, it was a really great thing to look forward to, because I had like my big sisters who would like, listen to me and like sort of help me through from like even more of a life perspective of like, in 10 years, you're not going to feel this way, and it was great. And, I got through so much during those meetings, and I have to talk about our meetings because we would consistently meet at the same place, which I don't think they're there anymore, correct?
No.
It was in the East Village. It was called the Crooked Tree. It was
crepes.
Crepes. It was a little creperie. They had no kitchen, just like literally a hot plate. And we would sit there for like 5 hours, and we would get our savory crepes for dinner, and then our sweet crepes. For dessert. And this is where I'm going to reveal something about Dina that you might not know. Her friends and family do. But there was a giant tub of Nutella on a shelf in this place.
Correct.
On the, like near the ceiling. It was, I'd never seen anything like it. And, we would always get Nutella banana crepes, like Nutella everything, like obviously, come on. And Dina once said, I love Nutella so much that when I die, I want to be cremated and buried in one of those giant Nutella tubs.
That is correct.
And no one doubted you. No one thought you were kidding. Like we were like, yep, got it. We'll make sure it happens. Like
I've since seen cremation urns. I don't think it has to be that big. I think I could fit in something smaller.
Enormous, yeah.
But if you remember this disgusting part, is that I did say that you could either empty out the jar and put me in there, or you could leave half in and mix me into the Nutella. And it's up to you if you want to spread it on a piece of toast and, have me. I don't advise against that. I mean, I don't advise that to happen, because I don't know how that works if you eat like human remains. But yes, this is my brain. And now that you've shared this with everyone, I'm going to say, when I pass, if this is by chance a posthumous episode, that you are all going to now be accountable to make sure that happened. Otherwise, I will come back and haunt everyone from the grave.
I believe you. Anyway, so that is how we met. And I promise you, I don't even go through the grocery store and see a tub of Nutella without like thinking of you.
No one does.
No
one does. No one does. I will say this just to people who are out there listening who might not know what Nutella is, although I'm sure a lot of people do. It's now become a little bit more commercialized. It's available in America. At the time when I was growing up, it wasn't so much. It was very much an Italian thing. It was, I think, bought by Ferrero Rocher, and they took on the Italian company. Or I could be making all that up, and maybe it's always been available, but my parents refused to bring it into the house. But the point is that now it's become a little bit more Americanized. It's much more available in normal grocery stores instead of having to go to like the Italian, shop to go get it. And it's had its controversies. There was like a whole palm oil discussion a while back, but honestly, I do not care because Nutella to me was like peanut butter to Americans.
Yeah.
And that's what we grew up on. We spread that ish on everything. And now I just don't even bother with the bread. I just eat it out of the jar.
I respect it. I do.
With a spoon, without a spoon, whatever. Well, Diana, I want to say, first of all, that going back down that discussion from when we first met each other, that I am so unbelievably proud of how far you have come, of being the younger of us, to have met, I'm going to take credit, of course, for all of it, you've met almost all of the goals, if not all of them, that you set out to do, including like purchasing a home, which is very unheard of in New York City. Not a lot of people buy their places.
Well, everyone should know that we mapped my entire future out in
Post-it notes
on the wall at the Crooked Tree. Thank you, Crooked Tree, for letting us do that. But yeah, we had mapped out a promotion, a home ownership, getting out of my parents' house, all of that. And I do, I have to say, there's no way I could have purchased a home if it weren't for my parents. Because, I'm from New York City, I'm from Queens, and I was allowed to live at home for like 10 years. And that is really special. Right. It's really privileged. It's not something that everybody who comes here to create their careers gets to do. And so I am 100% aware of how important that was. And yeah, I mean, not that it wasn't hard, it was totally hard. But yeah, it's something that I wouldn't have been able to do that a lot of my peers in their 40s have not been able to do, which is, sort of a crisis. But yeah, I really am grateful to my parents for that one.
Well, you bring up a good point there because you and I both grew up Italian. Yes. And for those of you who might not know, regardless of where you're living, Italian parents love to keep their children at home forever.
Well, and yeah, that's funny because that is true. But so my parents are a hybrid. Okay. My dad is only, I think, a quarter Italian. So that's where the last name comes from. My mom is literally everything else. Her maiden name is Smith. So, They came from lots of different places. I even asked my grandfather once, like, where's your family from? And he was like, I don't know. All four of my grandparents were born in New York City. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I'm a true New Yorker is what I tell everyone.
You are. 3
of my grandparents were born in Brooklyn, all over Brooklyn. And one of my grandparents, my grandmother on my dad's side, was born in Flushing, Queens, which is where I grew up. And so this kind of interesting hybrid upbringing of like my parents actually weren't those like keep your kids home kind of people, because my mom was the youngest of 5, and so people were in and out of her house growing up like her entire life. Like her oldest brother is 18 years older than her, and he was like fighting a war before like she even came into the picture, you know what I mean? So it was a weird she just never has been that kind of mom who like checks up on me, even like for her, like no news is good news. Like in their house, I remember my grandparents' house, like if no one's bleeding, it's fine. Like no one cares. It's fine. But lots of family togetherness and like big family stuff over there. It's like Irish, English, Dutch, Scottish, all like that kind of super familial upbringing. And then my dad is Italian, Hungarian, and German. And so he's half Italian, so I'm a quarter Italian. That's what I meant to say.
Gotcha.
So because my grandfather is his father was born here, but his half siblings were not. They were born in Italy. And so his father came over to the US with a new wife when his first wife passed away, and they had 2 more children here. So and I'm actually really fun side pandemic project. I've been talking to my aunt, my grandfather's sister-in-law, about our family history, and she has done a lot of digging into her husband, my uncle, his whole family, and the Francos and where they came from, and it's really, really interesting. So I've been like chatting with her on the side about that. But yeah, so my grandfather's half siblings were Italian and first, came over. So their kids were first generation, but my grandfather is first generation. So like, that's crazy to me. So
okay.
yeah. So I grew up with these, like, all of these kinds of different foods in my life, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is a perfect segue, because here I am, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just old and I can't remember things anymore, but I don't know if I knew you had such like a mix in your bloodline there.
Yeah.
And then that makes sense to me now that it wasn't exactly where you were being held hostage by your parents.
Yeah.
to never leave home. Where I'm like, I have to go. And no, stay. Yeah. So tell me kind of what that was growing up. Like, what did you have traditions? Did you have family functions? Did you have, dinner time and so on? Yeah, go ahead.
So we had tons of different things going on. So first of all, I grew up in Queens, in Flushing, Queens, where on the corner, there was a Jewish temple. 2 blocks away, there was a giant Greek church, a very big Greek community in the community. And my mother was friends with a lot of women in like a mother's group that she joined when I was born. So she was friends with a lot of like Greek women and learned how to make like, phyllo dough, like from them. And then we had like a huge Italian population. So there was just like food everywhere from all these different places. And, my parents were pretty adventurous, although I was not. I still won't eat a stuffed grape leaf, but I will definitely take part in like spanakopita and like all those fun things. So there was that, but then, my dad, grew up very Italian because my grandfather's traditions kind of came through, and his whole extended family, who we spent a lot of holidays with, sort of assimilated into like Italian food traditions for our holidays. So always like an antipasto, even on like Thanksgiving, we have turkey and stuff, but like there was also antipasto with like all the cold cuts and, olives, which I actually hate, and, all those fun like things. And I actually didn't like it growing up, but like, I love it now. I think it's great. And then Christmas was our big holiday at my parents' house. And lasagna is what we have for Christmas still to this day. And it's a big tradition. My grandfather, I believe, was the big proponent of it. He was very specific about how it is built.
Instructions, architectural instructions.
Exactly. And so if you can picture my mother at 22 or 23 years old when she had just married my dad and then had a child, going into my mother, who's Irish and English and Dutch and Scottish and like all these sort of like white things, like goes into the Italian deli by our house. There is a beautiful Italian deli that always had like panettones and probably had Nutella, when I was growing up, all that stuff. She went in there and asked for like, my dad gave her a list for the antipasto, and she was like, prosciutto, what is this? Like she couldn't pronounce anything, and like got like super shamed by the Italian, ladies who lived there, who worked there and owned the shop and only spoke Italian. And so like my dad goes now.
I'll handle that.
But like, so we, she adopted all these traditions from my father's family, which was really cool because, she started just cooking their food according to their instructions. And so, when I was in high school or college, I would help her a lot on Christmas Eve, like making all this food. And in college, I believe or maybe it was after college, my brother, for his job, like he wasn't coming home for holidays. So I kind of did it myself. And, you know, my mom and dad and I kind of came up with a system. So on Christmas Eve, we make the lasagna and I build it. Like my dad boils the noodles, my mom makes the sauce all day, and like all the other fixins that go with the meal. And then I build the lasagna. And I remember the first time I did it, I was like, I built this lasagna on Christmas. And my grandfather looked at me and he's like, oh yeah? Did you crisscross the noodles? And I was like, of course I did. So basically what you have to do to make the lasagna not fall apart is you have to do it one way, like noodles going one way, and then your next layer, they go the other way. So like, this is gospel in my family. If you don't do it this way, it's not real. So
he gave you the test.
Yes. So that's what I grew up doing. So those were our traditions. And then, you know, my mom's family, you know, my mom's mom was such a good cook. And, you know, so for Easter and stuff, like we always had like a big ham and like all those fun things. And so I had a really good mix of like traditional American holiday type foods, and then, you know, really traditional Italian and Hungarian and German foods, because my dad's mother is a really fantastic cook as well. So I just sort of picked up a lot of different things because my mom picked up a lot of different things, and you know, and so I cook all the time, and I you know, I sort of bring in all of these like great foods that we had growing up that like into my daily life. Like I don't wait for Christmas to make lasagna now. I make it as I go, you know?
Right, exactly. It's not a special 1 year.
No, it's dish. Like 100% not. I'm like, why don't we eat these foods all the time? I mean, I know why, but like still.
Because they're time consuming. Wait, I have a question for you. Actually, I have two questions because I'm scribbling frantically as you're speaking. The first one is, do you remember what region of Italy your dad's family was from? Did they ever mention that to you?
Found out recently, recently in the past, like 15 years, my cousin told me that they were from Naples. I believe. Oh,
Naples. Okay.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty well known. I thought it was like, like ours is a tiny little town in, you know, the middle of nowhere. And then the other question I was going to ask, especially since, you know, your mom was kind of being handed down these recipes to follow, in our life here, when I was growing up, we had thousands of tiny scrap pages that were just handwritten, mostly in like covered in grease that you couldn't even see the words anymore. And those were our recipes. It was only when I finally got a computer and, you know, like later in my life that I said to my mom, I'm going to transcribe all of these because this is ridiculous. But did you have things to follow? Was it word of mouth? Did you have actual like recipe books to follow?
No.
As you were learning these, you were just watching and doing.
My mom has stuff written down for sure. Like she's definitely got recipes like from her mom, like my grandmother, like in a book, like in a box somewhere. She has cookbooks because when she was first married and so young and was cooking every night, she like had recipe books. I mean, you know, like didn't everybody, but like, you know, Betty Crocker and all that stuff. And
right.
But I don't really ever follow recipes. Like I'll look something up. And if it's baking or something, like I know that it's chemistry and I have to like figure that out. But like, but no, I learned everything from doing like my mom's best recipes. Like honestly, growing up, like her best things were things she made up. So, you know, because cooking dinner every night for a family of 4 is, you know, it's hard. And that's one thing I do want to say, like my parents were united on this. We never had a single night that we didn't all 4 of us sit down to dinner. And that was really important to them. It was like my grandmother, my mom's mom had said something like that, like, you know, the family unit like has to sit down to dinner every night. And it's what we did. And like, you know, for the most part, like when we were young, my brother and I would just kind of listen to my parents talk and, you know, eat our dinner and then go our separate ways. But, you know, as we got older, it was, you know, different. And even when like I moved back into the house in my 20s, my brother was long gone. He lives in Florida. Like, we still did it. Like, you know, I still came home, even if I had to work late or whatever, like they would leave me food. But like, if I came home at a reasonable hour, like I sat down with them and we had dinner. So that's like a big deal in my family. And they still do that. You know, like we always joke that we plan everything around the next meal. So like, I mean, if I'm visiting my brother at breakfast, he's like, so what's for lunch? And, you know, like we make plans and like we go out and like, you know, that was another thing we did that I'm just remembering is growing up, you know, my parents were frugal in the sense that like we never had like the latest gadgets or Nintendos or anything like that. Like it wasn't they wanted to instill more important things in us.
Right.
Like, so we went on vacation every year. We went to like Disney World or, but like we lived kind of modestly in general. And something we did every single Sunday was, we went to church in the morning. And then like we would spend the day doing something like, interesting, like going for a walk somewhere or seeing a museum or, whatever. And then we always went out to dinner on Sunday nights. It was like a thing. I got introduced to a lot of foods that way too, because it was always like whatever they decided we were going to do. But we always went out to dinner. So it was like a really big treat because I knew other kids who like never went to restaurants.
Yes.
And
yes,
was, and we had, in New York, you have so many great local restaurants, like wherever you are, even in the boroughs, like there's just so much good stuff out there. So like I grew up just eating different stuff because, my parents wanted to try this restaurant, and like it was great. So that's something that they always did too, is like always sit down to a meal. Sundays were our nights out. And it was really special. And like, I know my brother even feels this way too, but like, it's kind of like how I live now. It's like, even though I'm single and, I eat by myself a lot, I still kind of like have that, like every night you sit down, you do your thing, like, and it's special if you get to go out and spend some time with people and like really, and experience that restaurant experience, which I mean, eventually we all will again, right? This is a pandemic. And
we'll be eventually let out to play. Well, this is interesting what you're saying too. And also it's come up a little bit in some of the other interviews I've done. And I also teach some of this in the undergrad classes that I teach too, about incorporating a child in those early experiences of food, whether it's cooking or shopping or going out to taste different, traditional recipes in some way, or going around to different markets and allowing the child to experience a variety of food and cooking styles and so on, to really allow that well-roundedness so that when they do grow up, they're less picky, or maybe they have a little bit more of a broader sense of other cultures that are out there as well. So I really love that you shared that with us, because I didn't. I mean, I was all just Italian all the time. And my dad was very anti-restaurant because he was like, we have food at home. So
yeah.
I'm like, I know, but like there's other people out there outside and I want to go play with them. And so I feel like we were a little bit more restricted. Our Sunday dinners were definitely family-based, so that was something that you and I share as well. And I think a lot of people do too. There's always either the dinner time or the Sunday, the one day a week where everybody's kind of getting around. And then obviously the holidays come into play too with that traditional role as well. Yeah. So I forget if I said this when we first opened up our conversation, but you mentioned, you're in publishing. So unlike a lot of the other guests that I'm having on, you're not in the health and wellness profession, but that doesn't mean that your early food memories and behaviors and experiences didn't somehow, go along the way of your growth and other your formative years, et cetera. I might've said that already. So do you want to talk a little bit about how these patterns maybe kept establishing, or what you enjoy doing, or if there's anything that kind of played a role in your growing years? More independent.
Well, one thing I will say is that I was, so I was never like a super like sporty kid or, anything like that, but I was a dancer. Yeah. So growing up, I did dance a lot, and, it was something that I considered going into professionally. And then I just didn't, because I wanted it. Does anybody remember that Full House episode where Stephanie wants to become a professional dancer and then decides it's too much work and dancing just should be fun? I saw that episode and it changed my life. I was like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to do that. Like I want it to stay fun.
Which is, by the way, a good gauge for anything you do. Is it going to be fun, or is it going to be work?
Exactly. And so I didn't go into that field. I also just didn't think I was A, good enough, or B, had the right body type. Which is something that everybody deals with. And it wasn't until I was well into high school and college that I realized that, the world was changing a little bit when it came to dancers' bodies. And I really wish that it happened 10 years earlier for me, because I think my life would have been a little bit different. But my other love was reading, and I love media. So I love TV and movies and articles and reading up on stuff and history, and I just consume a lot of media. And so I ended up falling into that internship that I had with Libby was sort of something I fell into on the publicity end of publishing, which I didn't know existed. Basically, every publishing house, traditional publishing house, has a publicity arm. They have, a marketing staff and a publicity, a managing ed staff and they have proofreaders and copy editors and the editing staff and the salespeople. But I fell into, through a couple different accidents of my life into publicity, which is basically your in-house PR, public relations, and basically, all the authors and all the books that come out for each season, you sort of on a title basis, you're assigned titles, and you book media for those books and those authors. So it could be anything from book reviews to interviews with the author, and it differs depending on genre. So like, celebrity memoirs will get like lots of television and like lots of flashy stuff, and fiction will get, a lot of like good reviews and stuff like that. So that's like all in a nutshell my entire career. But promoting the author, promoting the book, promoting the title, promoting whatever's going along with that. Right. Exactly. And so bringing it back to food, the life of a publicist in publishing is really interesting, because there are some days where you're just at your desk all day, or right now at my kitchen table all day. And then there are other days where, you're sort of running around. And so your eating habits can like change depending on the day. So I definitely have talked to a lot of publicists over the years that, feel a lot of pressure to like have drinks at events, and that kind of thing, and networking, and like also like media stuff. And, we get to go into lots of different spaces. And then like, I've been to like morning shows, like the Today Show and stuff like that, where there's like the spread of like great food that no one's touching because like no one would, but like, I'm like, what bagels? And so you definitely, and then like there are other days that like, you're just running out for a salad, or you bring your own lunch because New York City is expensive. And, and so there's just like, I think a lot of publicists that I've talked to over the years have had like trouble with this, because it's such a weird schedule, right? You're just, every day is a little bit different. And so, and, it depends on what's going on triage wise during your day, whether you're, trapped to chained to your desk all day, answering emails, or, if you can actually take an hour to like take a walk and get lunch. I will say that I prioritize that hour to take a walk, because that's just how I de-stress and sort of think about things. And if I work through lunch, like I'm a useless person, like you don't want to talk to me. But anyway, for food, like you just kind of, you take it as it goes. And like, and then there are events at night a lot. So, a lot of times dinner isn't until like 9 or 10 p.m. because that's when you get home.
Yeah. And I mean, you do bring up a good point there too, because in the work environment, under normal circumstances, when there is that networking component, or you're going out, or you're doing a launch for something and you're doing celebratory things, there are going to be food and drink related components to that. And so it can be quite erratic depending on how many days a week you're doing all this stuff. Or on the other end, if you're at your desk, like you said, just, sitting there and you have these deadlines to meet, that can also be somewhat challenging too, to maintain boundaries and know that you have to do things that are deadline, and there's, time sensitivity things to it, but then not necessarily denying yourself of those self-care components either. So I really love that you said you take that hour. That's kind of, I always ask like, what's your non-negotiable? And that sounds like it's a non-negotiable, that you're going to take that time for yourself.
Yeah. And I have to bring it back to my parents, because something we also did was every time we went out to dinner on those Sundays, we always took a walk.
Go for a walk.
Which I hated as a kid. I was like, what do you mean take a walk? Like, and sometimes we were at a nice place where we could like walk down the street and take a walk around the block. And other times we were like in a parking lot, and my dad's like, oh, let's take a spin around. And I'm like, what? Like,
helps us digest.
Yes. And I literally am the worst person in the world if I don't get 30 minutes to an hour every day of a walk. And that is 100% my father. Yeah. And he's the same way. That's actually how my parents met, by the way. They worked together, and, he, he would always go walking at lunchtime. He prioritized a walk at lunch.
Yeah.
And so when they met, he was like, next time it rains, we'll go out to lunch. So he wouldn't even like give up his private walk time, which I thought was great, because it was like, well, he needs that time. I am 100% that. So, so yeah, it's something that I always prioritize. And I know, like, if I work through 2 p.m., 3 p.m., the last couple of hours of my day, I'm a mess. Like, I can't concentrate, and I'm useless anyway. So it's like, you either you take the full hour or you lose 4. Like,
right.
So that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
And I think this goes back to one of our other discussions, or maybe what we were talking about before our like official interview recording session here, that about maintaining and achieving that balance when you might not be able to do, or you might not want to do, what would be considered like regular physical activities, or, making sure everybody's working out all the time. It's like all of these different components keep us moving in some way and help us maintain our wellness in general, both mind and body, right? You're moving around and you're de-stressing in that way. So that ability to achieve balance, I think, is always kind of at the forefront. And what does that really mean? So in your case, do you have a routine right now that you follow? Do you get up at a certain time every day? Do you do different things on the weekends? Are there certain other non-negotiables that you do? And anything else that you want to share about, like, a current you, the current day in life of you?
Yeah, I would say, I'm in my late 30s. I've sort of developed routines at this point. They change and ebb and flow over time. But also, one of the benefits of working in publishing is that you work with a lot of people who are doctors and, like, teach things. So I did work on a book a couple of years ago called The Sleep Solution by Dr. Chris Winter. I have to shout it out because he is one of the leading sleep specialists in the country.
Important.
And
sleep is so important.
Yeah, and he would be really mad at me for like a lot of my habits, like staying on Instagram like till like 2 a.m. But he one of the things I took away from that book was you should get up at the same time every day as much as you can, because it does help your body sort of regulate itself, and you will be tired at a particular time every day. And so I do try to get up before 9 a.m. every day. Like, every now and then, I go a little later on the weekend or whatever, but like I usually get up between like 8 and 8:30. So, and even on the weekends, I try to do that. When I was a kid, forget it. When I was even a young adult, forget it. Like, I would sleep till noon, 1 p.m. Like, I was that like erratic, like stay up all night person, because I just love nighttime, and like I get my best thinking done and like my best stuff done. But I started really, even if I am up till 2 a.m, like getting up at 8:30. So I do that all the time. And then, I usually, these days I work in the morning. If I have a meeting with someone on my team, I sometimes take it outside and like walk while I take that meeting.
Great.
Yeah. So like, I mean, technology is great, right? You could just like take your phone and like go for a walk around the park and have a meeting. And that is one of the benefits of working from home during a pandemic is you can kind of alter that space. So I don't feel like a real person unless I get an hour of walking a day. And I love my Fitbit. I got a Fitbit a few years ago, and I love it because, I wanted to track like how much I was actually doing. And I usually get up to about like 8,000 or 9,000 steps like on a regular day. That's not like I tried day. That's a regular day. And so, my regular days are like 12,000 or something like that, so I usually walk a few miles a day.
Can you clock that in like under a certain amount of time? Because it takes me about 3 hours just to walk around the block.
I am a fast walker. I'm a New Yorker. I'm a fast
You are.
walker.
This is true.
I actually got made fun of in high school once because, so in my high school, we had 4 minutes between classes, and I went to a very, very physically large school in Queens. And, you had to book it from one end of the building to the other in 4 minutes with all these people. And one of my friends once was like trying to catch up to me. And I remember when she did, she was like, I've been calling you for like 30 seconds. And I was just like, yo, we got 4 minutes. I gotta get to class. Like, and so
I don't have the time for you.
I learned to like navigate New York City streets in my high school because it was like you had to like duck and dodge and like get where you needed to go onto that bell because there was no excuses. Like if you were after the bell, you couldn't be like, I was stuck in human traffic. They were like, no. So
human traffic.
I'm a fast walker. I can cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time, and I often do. And but I love walking everywhere. So I've just been able to do that a lot. So it is a big priority for me, like lately, that I get a couple hours in at least a few times a week. There have been some days where it's like a little bit hot, so I won't do it. But like, and weather does play a huge factor for me. But like, for the most part, I don't really do under 2 miles a day.
That's fantastic. And I was going to say too, with the, the New Yorker mentality of, I got to go, I got to book it. I'm hauling from here to there, that we sometimes don't I live in New York as well, as you know, but I'm not living there right now. And I'm not from New York to begin with, but from our perspective, when you're in the city, it does feel like it's just this fast paced attitude that we don't have time to stop and talk. We don't have time to look at trees. And I love that everything's kind of slowing down, where even if you are moving around at your own pace, that you're actually taking a moment to just enjoy nature, enjoy the sights, look and see if you notice different things. That's so sweet.
I've never been like a hiker. Like I've never been like a nature girl. But I have hiked every trail around my apartment. I have a really beautiful park near me. So I have hiked every trail there is. I've gone into other boroughs and hiked their trails. I've seen things. I heard one of your previous guests say this, but like watching the flowers bloom at different times, like you never know, because you're in a high-rise office all day, and so you don't know what's and in the middle of Manhattan. So like you could go to Central Park, but I feel like I always feel it's so man-made and like it's not natural, but like seeing. I'm being so snobby about that, but I'm seeing like on these nature trails, like what naturally blooms at different stages of the spring and the summer, and it's really interesting. And my allergies have been going crazy, but like it's been
worth it,
right? Totally worth it. It's been really beautiful to like see the daffodils and then the tulips and then these flowers and what's that flower and like, oh my goodness, like what's happening now? And I've never been able to appreciate even my own neighborhood the way that I have during this time, because I'm never home,
Right.
So it's really, really nice to be able to like, walk down the street and then all of a sudden you get a whiff of a scent of something and you're like, what is that tree? What is that flower? What is that? And so that's been really, really wonderful about this time.
Oh my gosh. It's the total positive spin to an otherwise awkward situation, uncomfortable situation. I want to go back for a sec. You mentioned before about kind of falling into publishing was like an accident for you to be in the publicity department. And I think there is no such thing as accidents. I think that we are all meant to be exactly where we're supposed to be, and that you are perfect for it, because we're going to now switch a little bit now into discussions about publishing, but also like media. I watch you post a lot of things. You're very involved in the media world. We had, I think, a couple of pre-interview conversations about, celeb postings and dealing with the kind of outside noises that come in. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too? Because that's a perspective that you're coming from somebody who kind of encourages people to be out there and promoting themselves and making themselves known and getting a name for themselves when they have something to sell or promote.
Yeah. And, some of my friends were talking about publishing, like magazine publishing and stuff like that. And I was like, sure, that sounds good. And so I ended up like getting my act together in my junior year and like pursuing internships. So I pursued lots of internships in magazine publishing, which I ended up really not liking, but at the same time, it provided a solid foundation for what I do now, because I pitch magazines all day.
Right.
So,
right.
So like that was a really, really great experience, even though I knew it wasn't for me. So I encourage anybody out there, take internships, because it is a great way to learn what you don't like. Yeah. So, that really focused me. And then I ended up doing an internship with a literary agent, which I didn't know what literary agents did at the time. And literary agents they represent authors and they take submissions and they shop your book around to publishers. So I ended up working for both a literary agent and a literary scout. And the scout does that for foreign publication, for foreign publishing houses. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot about the back end of the business on that end. And then I was living with a friend of mine, one of my best friends, and, she had decided that she wanted to move. And I then had an issue with well, how am I going to stay in this apartment? I was in grad school at the time. I went to grad school for American Studies, which again, just to sidebar, that prepared me for this as well, because I did a liberal arts American Studies program at Columbia where classes in all different subjects, like undergrad and grad. So I didn't have to be a major to take a sociology class. I didn't have to, on the grad level. It was so crazy. And I got to learn a lot, a little about a lot of different things, which is essentially what I do in publishing and PR now. I read a book, absorb that one little thing, and then out to the masses in whatever space that is, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or whatever. I sort of have this sort of chaotic knowledge of all these different things at the same time, and so I didn't really go into one field of study. I my grad school prepared me for that. But anyway, I was living with a friend who decided to move, and so I needed to now pay for my half of the apartment for the next year because I was still. And I ended up falling into this paid internship at Houghton Mifflin, which is now Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. But Houghton Mifflin had a paid internship. And so for the next year, I was able to, and it was in publicity, which I had never done before, but I'd worked for agents, and agents kind of have to track publicity of their authors. So I kind of knew what that would be like. And so I fell into this internship because of necessity, really. And ended up really liking the media side. And I met my friend Libby, but I also had some mentors in the publicity side that really turned me on to media. And I remember one of my projects was call a bunch of radio stations and see who'll have Venus and Serena Williams for a contest. And I was okay, and so I ended up learning a lot about how radio works, how TV works, how book signings work, and how it all works together to promote a thing. And it was really exciting. And one of the best things I got to do was probably a little bit later in my career, when I actually was working full time, was going to a radio station. That's so exciting. Going to a television station, it's so exciting. You get to see how the sausage is made,
right.
And it's really fun. And and so now it's still, I mean, it's one of the most exciting parts of my job is getting to see the media side of it, and how my talent that I'm representing gets to be part of that show, and what that means for the show and for them. It's a symbiotic relationship. The show needs talent, the person needs to promote something. So it's a really fun thing. So yeah, watching people promote stuff, especially in this new space with online and Instagram and all these sort of more organic promotional tools. It's really fun because you can see who does it well and you can see who does it badly. And I'm always fascinated by that too. But yeah, I love seeing people promote their stuff in a really organic way. I think it's sometimes better than what we see on scripted television and stuff like that.
Sometimes I see a lot of hit or misses on social media. I do see messages that can get a little twisted as far as, if it worked for me, it'll work for you. And I'm not always. And also the following and kind of that malleability of a lot of people who might be so desperate to kind of learn from celebrities, or people who are now, I guess anybody could be a celebrity. You don't have to have what would be star status from Hollywood lines. You could be a celebrity because you are a popular YouTuber.
Right.
That, these followings that we see kind of, I feel sometimes it makes me a little nervous because I'm just yes, but you have 100,000 people following you, but I'm not always in love with certain people's messages. And I think now, like you were saying, before with the whole dance discussion too. We're in a new kind of stage of life where people are a little bit more accepting of what is not considered the traditional or ideal, whatever, norm, body type, way of eating. Like we're trying to be a little bit more respectful of the range and the spectrum of things. So it's not just always this one size fits all way of doing things. But sometimes with social media, I tend to get nervous about, who's out there and promoting something and not really making sure that their message is sensitive enough in that way. But of course, then you also have the opposite side of people will call you out on it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Honestly, you make such a great point. Like one thing as a PR person, one thing who promotes books that are sometimes nonfiction from doctors or whatnot. The one thing that I've learned pitching traditional media, like, morning shows, radio, stuff like that, newspapers, everything.
Yeah.
Is that you don't get anywhere with your message with those places unless you have credentials. Right. So you can write a book about, like, you could write a lifestyle book and, this is what worked for me. Like, that's absolutely fine. But no one is going to actually put you on the air unless you're a celebrity, which is like a whole other thing. But again, but like, you definitely have to have those credentials to back things up. And I don't even feel comfortable pitching someone who doesn't have those credentials. Like I would feel 100% comfortable pitching you because you have, letters after your name, so it's like, oh, she knows what she's talking about because she went to school and figured this out and like has done all this research and like, this is her thing. And, and so that is really important. And it's not to say that like people don't have great advice.
Right.
But I think then it's important to present it that way. Like, this is what worked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that because that's one of the things, again, we all might have the similar mission, but those of us who have some of the academic degrees or knowledge to back that up, we can see things in a much more critical way and understand a little bit more about, well, this might do damage, or maybe this is not the right thing for you. And so I do often tell people that, just because somebody's out there saying it worked for them, it'll work for you, or they've had success with whatever they're doing and they've been around for 20 years talking about this stuff, still find out what makes them an expert. Like, is it just because they've took it upon themselves to read things? And again, DIY is also okay, but just be careful and cautious of who you're getting your advice and your information from, because it comes down to, at least in the health and wellness world, since we are kind of talking in that respect, that it comes down to this individualized approach. There is no just giant stamp that can be put on everybody. It has to be sensitive to your upbringing, your culture, your diseases, your genetic background, like all of these things come into play. So just, be the owner. We don't come with owner's manuals as humans. So, but try to be accountable and take ownership of who you are before you kind of go follow people without a little bit of just, researching them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think before you share is like definitely one of my mottos is like, consider the source, consider who it's coming from, consider their background. Right. If you had to turn it around and pitch that person to somebody else, what would you say? Like what would you put down? I'm telling you, when I write pitches all day long, and sometimes I'm stumped. I'm like, I got nothing, and like that's bad. That's a bad sign, right? It's like, so and like sometimes you have to like zhuzh it to like make someone sound really interesting, but like at the same time, like they're like, if you flip that and you say, well, what would I tell someone else to recommend this advice and this person, you might actually get stopped and be like, oh, you know what, why am I following them? Is it because I just like them in some way, or is it because they really I really trust them? Trust is a huge thing in media. It's huge. And so, and unfortunately there's a lot of misplaced trust. And, we've all fallen for everything. We grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like, we've fallen for every stupid diet, every stupid, I mean, I always love when people are like, oh, this diet, you should eat all this one thing. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
I'm questioning that.
Right.
The sensationalization of certain things, just, again, how short term, how sustainable. But we are looking for quick fixes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, right? Miracle cures, miracle pills, all these things. We don't necessarily feel like we want to do the work, or sometimes it is quite challenging. But then I kind of turn that around as well by saying, well, what is it about your health and who you are that you wouldn't want to prioritize making an effort to maintain that. Like, why do you want a quick fix when it comes to your own body? And so that's something that I think then becomes the behavioral discussion. It's not just about showing up and handing somebody, a 5-day meal plan of something and saying, follow this and work out 30 minutes a day. It's about really understanding the behavioral components behind the scenes of how their own pursuits and food dynamics and food behaviors are in that way. So can I go off to what the future you might entail? Because you've been in publishing for a good amount of years. Do you see yourself continuing with this, opening up your own agency one day? Like, what's the future? Oh, staying around in New York forever and ever? What's the future you looking like?
Well, as long as I have to wait for the rich husband to come along and whisk me off to like some beach somewhere, yes, I will be staying here. That sounds so sexist, but it's like not. It's
Listen, you put in your time. You put in your time. You've done your work.
Yeah,
enough.
I always make that joke with my friends, and some people get it and some people don't. But like, I would love for just to have someone pay the bills, and like I get to do my own thing, and make money too. But like, giant beach house. That is the ideal. No, look, my whole family's in New York. Most of them. I mean, people have moved out too, but. I don't really see myself moving. Like, anytime I go anywhere and I come back, like, I hate it. And then I'm like, yeah, but this is where I am. Like, it's where I belong. Yeah. So it's like a weird, like, I feel like I belong here. But I'd love to get away for a little bit. But yeah, so, and I do see myself staying in publishing and maybe branching out to other things like on the side. But yeah, I every time I get discouraged or have a bad day or, feel like maybe it's not for me, like I always like have something that I go back to, like I said, those fun parts of my job, like going to a radio station or like, like seeing something come to fruition or watching an author do an interview or something like that. And it's just like, it kind of like knocks me back into, oh, right, I do love this. And
there's a validation part of that too. That's something that plays along the lines of what we were saying before. If you don't love it, if it's not fun, then it is unfortunately work. And then you have to kind of ask yourself, am I meant to be here? Is it time for me to move on? But if you keep getting that fuel fired, under your, I guess, your gut or your butt, I don't know which one it is, but whatever. If you have that fire burning and it keeps kind of, getting stronger or at least relighting as you go on, then you're in the right section.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I feel like, like work isn't supposed to be fun all the time. And,
right.
It's because it's work. But, if there's something meaningful in it, and I love that people always need books to read, whether it's for reference or for entertainment, they always have that. And, no matter what form it's going to come in, 10 years, if it's a physical book or if it's an ebook or some kind of content, either way, like, content is important and people need it and they need to share. And like, there's just so much to learn from other people's experiences. And so, that's why I'm here. Like that belief in that important goal is why I'm here. And, even if I don't agree with a person, I want to hear from them. So I feel like books are so important to me and the people that I work with. I mean, one of the best things about working in publishing is the people in publishing. Everybody has a common love of written word, whether, no matter what their job is in the publishing sphere. And so there's this common goal that like, this is meaningful and it's important. And it's, it's something that people need. And so that's what keeps me going and staying in it.
I have a question before I ask my other question.
Yeah.
Much like the reason why I started this podcast, because I believe that people have a story to share no matter who they are, no matter how insignificant or important they believe themselves to be. Do you also believe that everybody has a book in them?
I do. I don't know if everybody has a publishable book in them.
Okay.
I'm going to say that because as a publishing professional, I know way too much. And
right.
And like point of sale and the competition, I know way too much about it and it's discouraging sometimes. However, I think that everybody should give it a go. Like if they want to give it a go, they should. you never know what's going to come out of that. I mean, so many great books have come out of slush piles that people
They really have.
Right.
I
mean, actually, when I worked I worked for Jonathan Franzen's agent, Susan Gollum. I don't even know if she would remember me, but because I was an intern, but I went through her slush pile as an intern, and I read.
You have to define slush pile to people who are not aware.
So people said, so when you're looking to publish a book, you really aren't going to get too far without an agent unless you self-publish, which is a whole other story, which I can't really talk about because I do work on the traditional publishing side.
This would be a conflict, right?
Total conflict. However, people, when they're publishing their book, they send query letters and pieces of their manuscript or their whole manuscript to agents to look for representation, because the agent is really the person that's going to sell that book to a publishing house. They're the ones that know the editors. They're the ones that know the genres, the identities of the imprints and all of that, and like they know how to sell it to a place that will actually publish your book. So, on Fridays, I would go through the big pile of submissions. And I would just kind of pick one up and start reading and, let her know if I thought it was good or not, which is a huge job for an intern. And, we write readers' reports and stuff like that. And I read this book that I loved. I loved it. And it was so, so good. And I told her about it like 30 or 40 pages in. I was like, this is really great. And she said, and I gave her a little 2-sentence description. She said, give me that. I want it. And I said, okay. And she read it over the weekend or that night or something. And the next day she started calling the author and was like, I want to publish this, blah, blah, blah. And it was a really fun, exciting thing, because I was like, I discovered something.
Jonathan Franzen.
Oh, right.
Holy cow, that's great.
It was really interesting at that point. The corrections was such a huge and every week that I worked at that internship, another box would arrive with another foreign edition. So her office was like lined with all of these foreign editions from 30 different countries that had done their own publication of that book. It was so huge, and it was really exciting to see that in action.
To have been a part of that. Yeah.
So this book actually dealt with a lot of lyrics by the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And it was really fun, mystery, inside the lyrics of the Beatles, which is something that people talk about a lot, but it was done in such a creative way. And she was like, I want this book. And then she came to me and she said, I can't publish it. We can't afford the rights. She's like,
because they have to give the rights up for the Beatles,
for that kind of stuff. You'd have to. And so remember, if you're writing a book, you have to give credit to everything that you use. And
you can't just be putting poems in the middle of chapters and not ask the original author
permission. You have to pay for it, and in a lot of cases and all that. And so she was like, Michael Jackson's estate owns all the lyrics to these Beatles songs, and there's no way I could publish it. I couldn't get a publisher to sign on because they would have to pay all this money to buy the rights to use the stuff. And I was like, well, that's a bummer. So getting back to it, yes, write the book, because it will bring joy to someone, and and maybe it would work. I remember that experience was interesting, because we went back and forth with well, could we do this another way? Could this person write this book without all of these things? And the answer was no. But at the same time, I was like, but this person should keep writing, because I was hooked. And so, write the book, but don't
write the book.
Talk to publishing professionals, talk to other authors that have done it, and, sort of lower your expectations, because you do really want to get it published. It can happen. And, there's really great stuff that we can do, but at the same time, don't put all your eggs in that basket. That's my advice.
Exactly. It is a very competitive field. It's a very saturated field. It's very difficult to get, a retainer of hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're not Stephen King or, whatever.
Exactly.
So that makes sense. But the question was, do people have books in them? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Right. If you enjoy writing and speaking and have a story to tell, then write it. And so if you can share it in whatever way you think you can. But, obviously the publishing route might take a little bit of extra effort.
Yeah. And time. Lots of time.
And time. Right. Exactly. Okay. So now that we are, I guess, technically wrapping up on this, I want to find out, are you publicly available online through social media handles or otherwise, where in case people want to find out a little bit more about you or reach out with questions or share your love for The Bachelor and other important things, is there a way
Attacked. I feel attacked.
for them? Not at all. Not at all. I said to you, you're a media guru, and that is part of pop culture and current state of affairs and all these things. So
Yep.
I love your takes on everything. I love your takes on all these things that I do not know anything about. But are you publicly available on social media? Because I can include the handles on the episode.
Yeah. So I on Instagram mostly. I am Lady Diana Franco.
Got it.
My grandmother used to call me Lady Di all the time.
Aw.
And on that note, so that's my regular Instagram where I, have all my friends and all my like personal opinions and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of weirdly starting like a side project that may go zero, like may go nowhere. But I created another handle that I wanted to use for like any sort of like design or style tips, like whether it's fashion or like interior stuff or everything like that, or even cooking,
home stuff. Yeah. Oh wow.
I started another Instagram account called Lady Di Styled, and I started like a year ago, and then I never made it public, and then like just a few weeks ago I was like, like let's just try this.
It's time.
Yeah, so
it's time.
I just thought I would dump all of my like fun like designing and decorating and style tips there, because I've had a lot of friends be like, please dress me, like I don't know how to dress, and like please go shopping with me, and I am really flattered by that, because that means like they think I have okay style, which is nice. And I have like really like frugal style too, so like like I like some expensive things too, but like I definitely like put and makeup and all that stuff. And so I've had friends be like, I need to dress for a job interview, please take me to the mall, and like okay, and so, or like, oh, this not that, those shoes not that one. And I kind of feel like I've always had a little bit of an inclination for it, so I thought, well, might as well just start it and see what happens. And so, like I'm trapped in my apartment anyway, I might as well like take pictures of the pretty curtains that I just bought, so.
And share designs. I love that too, because again, it's about that creative energy that you have going there as well, which I love that.
And again, I have zero expectations, so like it could go nowhere or it could become something, and so that's my whole thing.
I love it. Well, I'll be sure to link to all of these things in your episode. And then my final question, as you know it's coming, is, pun intended, of course, what is on your plate today? So it's Friday, it's early-ish in the day. Are you currently working? Do you have a lot on your plate, on your calendar? And then since the best thing to do when you're eating is also talk about the next meal. So what is the next meal for you?
Well, I am not working today. In the publishing industry, we have summer Fridays, which is nice, which is like an alternate schedule. So today is one of my days off, which I'm really excited about. And in the pandemic, this gets to my plate. I'm a shopper. I'm a grocery shopper. Like I go myself. Like I'm never like a delivery person, that type of thing. But because of this, I have become more of a delivery person. So I have been ordering things that are different that I normally wouldn't buy because it's too heavy to carry. And so one of the things I ordered in my last delivery order was a bunch of like melon and watermelon and stuff like that. And I'd ordered one of those like personal seedless watermelons. But because of like, whatchamacallit, like substitutions and stuff like that, the stores sometimes offer a substitution. I said, sure, substitutions are fine. So I ended up with a giant watermelon that would feed a 20-person 4th of July barbecue. And so, which was great, but also like, oh dear. And so literally every day this week I've been eating for lunch watermelon with goat cheese, like a goat cheese watermelon salad.
So good.
And so I've been doing later. I'm probably gonna make I make my own pizza dough a lot. I've been making like a really good whole wheat pizza dough, and I have some chicken, and I think I'm gonna make like a grilled chicken barbecue pizza.
That sounds delightful. And by the way, I'm laughing in my head because I'm thinking watermelon slushies, watermelon burritos, watermelon tacos. Like what could you possibly make with all that watermelon?
Well,
you'll figure it out.
That was my thought.
You can freeze it.
Yeah,
you could freeze it.
You could,
because it's all water.
Yeah, you could put it in a smoothie. You could do. I add cheese to a lot of things. So I was like,
I love
watermelon goat cheese. And it's a good lunch because it actually does fill you up. And you get a little bit of protein in there with the goat cheese. And so
yummy.
And it's great for summer. So that's what I'm doing.
Oh my gosh. Well, Ms. Diana Franco, you know how much I love you. We have been friends for 1,000 years, and we will be friends for 1,000 more. And I so appreciate you taking out the time and sharing your story with me and with the listeners as well. And I wish you a most wonderful, wonderful summer Friday and rest of the weekend.
I wish you the most wonderful things as well. And again, everybody should go back and listen to all of the previous episodes. I've gotten so much out of them. And you know, you just have such a great calming voice. Like you've been with me while I'm cooking, actually. And so I just highly recommend that everybody go back and listen to everybody's stories, because it is really, again, everyone has a book in them, but everyone has a story to tell. And it's really, really great to hear from other people that you don't know, just talking about their life. Cause you know, you do gain something from it for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I was going to say, that's not only the publicist in you talking, that's the personal person in you talking too. So thank you, and you're welcome.
Oh, I love you so much.
I love you too, my dear. All right. We will catch up again soon. Enjoy your weekend, hon.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me this week on the Dish with Dina podcast. I am Dina D'Alessandro, registered dietitian, nutritionist, founder, and chief executive life changer at Dish with Dina, and I'm also your host. If you liked what you heard, I would be so grateful if you could subscribe to this podcast, leave a review, and share this with others who you think might benefit from what we have to offer on these episodes. You can also join my mailing list at dishwithdina.com or email me at info@dishwithdina.com with questions, comments, feedback, and if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, because everybody eats and we all have a story to share. I hope you tune back in next week when we dish again.